Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. And today we're diving into a figure that I know a lot of you were interested in because a bunch of you sent over articles on this person, Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of listeners are really fascinated by him, maybe even a little bit obsessed.
I can see why. I mean, he's an interesting guy. I'm super curious to kind of go beyond the surface level.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, everyone knows the Titanic heartthrob,
Uh-huh.
but there's clearly a lot more to him.
Absolutely. From what I've seen in the articles you sent, there's a lot of curiosity about the choices he's made, in his career and his personal life, the causes he supports.
Yeah, yeah, and he's got that kind of aura of mystery around him, right? Super famous, but also private.
Exactly. We'll see what we can uncover about all of that.
Awesome. So where should we start? I guess with his upbringing. Seems like he had a kind of unusual childhood, at least according to one of the articles.
Yeah, so his parents separated when he was pretty young, but apparently they remained close, which was not that common back then. And his dad was involved in the counterculture art scene, which probably had a big impact on him.
Okay, so like exposed to a lot of different influences growing up. Makes sense. What else do we know about those early years?
Well, he grew up in some pretty interesting parts of LA, like East Hollywood and Los Feliz. So, like a mix of cultures, a real melting pot kind of environment.
That's cool. It definitely sounds like a unique upbringing, right? Not your
Huh?
typical Hollywood childhood. Oh, and speaking of Hollywood, I got to ask you about his name, Leonardo.
Mm.
Like, how often do you meet a Leonardo?
Right. It's pretty unique, and there's a story behind it, too. Apparently, his mom was pregnant, standing in front of a Leonardo da Vinci painting in a museum in Italy.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah, and she felt him kick for the first time, right there. So they decided to name him Leonardo.
Wow, that's like something out of a movie. Talk about destiny, huh?
You could say that, but even with a name like that, it sounds like his path to stardom wasn't exactly easy.
Oh, you mean all the rejections he faced early on? Yeah, one of the articles mentioned that.
Right, like he was told he was too unpolished or that his look was quirky, which is funny because now he's like the definition of Hollywood good looks.
I know, right? And the craziest part is that some agents actually suggested he change his name.
Oh yeah, to Lenny Williams. They thought it would sound more American and appeal to a wider audience.
Seriously, can you imagine if he'd actually done that?
I know, right? It's kind of mind-blowing. Like, would he have become the same Leonardo DiCaprio if he'd been Lenny Williams?
Good question. It seems like he really had to fight for his individuality, even from the beginning. He just wasn't going to compromise who he was no matter what.
Absolutely. And I think that says a lot about his character. He knew his own worth even when others didn't see it.
So he's Leonardo, he's determined to make it on his own terms, and then Titanic happens. Like, talk about a turning point.
Huge turning point. But, I mean, did you know that he almost didn't take the role?
Like, right, really? But Titanic was like the biggest movie of all time. Why would he turn that down?
He wasn't sure about the character, Jack Dawson. He didn't think the role was deep enough, challenging enough for him.
Interesting. So even with this massive opportunity, he was still prioritizing artistic integrity.
Right. Seems like it. It took some convincing from James Cameron, the director, to get him on board.
Wow. I bet Cameron's glad he managed to persuade him. So Titanic makes him a global superstar. Did he just dive headfirst into all the big budget Hollywood stuff after that?
Actually, no. He was pretty intentional about the roles he chose. You can kind of see a pattern emerging. Even then, he wasn't interested in just being a heartthrob.
Okay, so he's thinking long term, building a career, not just chasing fame.
Exactly. And that leads us to his collaborations with Martin Scorsese. Now, those are some seriously interesting
Oh,
films.
yeah, like The Aviator, Gangs of New York, The Departed, Shutter Island. He seems to really thrive in those complex, gritty roles, right?
Right. And these films are so different from the typical Hollywood blockbusters. They explore some pretty dark themes. Corruption, power, the human psyche. It's clear he's drawn to roles that challenge him, push him outside of his comfort zone.
Yeah, and working with a director like Scorsese, I mean, that's got to be pretty intense. I read that he's really into method acting. Like, he goes all in for his roles.
Oh, yeah. For The Wolf of Wall Street, he spent months researching the real Jordan Belfort, studying his mannerisms, even learning to talk like him.
I bet that was an interesting experience. And what about The Revenant? Wasn't that super grueling?
Oh, absolutely. Sub-zero temperatures, filming in remote locations, and you're not going to believe this.
Yeah.
He ate raw bison liver for one scene.
Raw bison liver. Oh, man, that's dedication.
Right. He's not afraid to push himself to the limit for a role. It's clear that acting is more than just a job for him. It's an art form.
It's like he's got to completely embody the character experience it all to make it feel real. And that brings us to another side of him that I think a lot of people are curious about, his environmental activism. Like, he's been vocal about this for a long time, right?
Yeah, it's not just a recent thing. He's been advocating for environmental causes for decades. And it's not just about showing up for photo ops. He's actually doing the work.
Yeah, one of the articles talks about the Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation. Seems like they've funded a ton of environmental projects worldwide, like over 200 projects and millions of dollars donated.
That's right. And they're involved in a wide range of initiatives, from protecting endangered species to promoting sustainable agriculture and renewable energy. They're really trying to tackle the climate crisis from multiple angles.
It's impressive. And he's also produced a couple of documentaries on climate change. Before the Flood and Ice on Fire. Those got a lot of attention, right?
They did. And I think they're really effective in raising awareness about the urgency of the climate crisis. They combine stunning visuals with scientific evidence and personal stories, making the issue both visceral and relatable.
It seems like he's really trying to use his platform to make a difference, to inspire people to take action. And he's taken his advocacy to some pretty high-profile places, too. Didn't he address the United Nations on climate change?
He did. And he was appointed as a UN Messenger of Peace with a special focus on climate change. So it's not just about talk. He's actually involved in shaping policy and trying to influence global leaders.
Okay, so we've got this picture emerging. The dedicated actor, the passionate environmentalist. But there's another piece to this puzzle that's super intriguing, I think. His personal life. Or I guess we should say the lack of public knowledge about his personal life.
Right. He's managed to keep a lot of that under wraps, which is pretty impressive considering how famous he is. I mean, he's had some high-profile relationships, but he's never been married, and he rarely, if ever, talks about his personal life in interviews.
It's almost like he's created this aura of mystery around himself.
Exactly. And that makes people even more curious, you know? The less he reveals, the more we want to know.
I wonder how he manages to pull that off, especially in today's world where it feels like everyone's sharing everything online.
It's a good question. Maybe we'll explore that a little bit later.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about his upbringing, his acting career, his environmental work, and even touched on the enigma of his personal life. What else should we dive into?
Well, there's one more big topic we should definitely address: the Oscars.
Oh, yeah? He finally won one, right?
Yeah.
After all those years of being nominated and coming up short, I think a lot of people were rooting for him.
They were. It became a whole thing, you know? The Oscar snub. Like, would he ever actually win? And then finally, in 2016, it happened. Best Actor for The Revenant.
I remember that. It felt like a collective sigh of relief, like finally the Academy got it right.
Right, and it was a huge moment for him, obviously. But it's also
Yeah.
interesting to look at the broader context of his career, all the other awards he's won, and the choices he's made along the way.
It's like he's always been playing the long game, you know, making decisions that align with his values, his artistic vision, even if they don't always lead to immediate rewards or recognition.
Absolutely. And that's something we can definitely delve into further.
Sounds good. Let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and explore that, along with a few other intriguing threads we've uncovered so far. Stay tuned. All right, so we're back and ready to dive a bit deeper into Leonardo DiCaprio, beyond the surface level.
Yeah, where were we? Ah, yes, the Oscars and that whole snub narrative.
Yeah, it really became a thing, didn't it?
I mean, 4 nominations before finally winning. That's a long time to wait for that golden statue.
It is, and some people even started speculating that the Academy had something against him, like maybe they didn't take him seriously because of his heartthrob image, or maybe because the roles he chose weren't always the typical Oscar bait, you know? He seemed more interested in challenging himself as an actor than chasing awards.
Definitely. And one of the articles you sent actually dives into that whole Oscar snub phenomenon and whether there are certain biases at play when it comes to who gets nominated and who wins.
Interesting. So, like, are certain types of roles or actors more likely to get recognized?
It's a complex issue, but the article suggests that there might be some unconscious biases, yeah.
Makes you wonder what would have happened if he'd gone for those more traditional Oscar-friendly roles.
Right. Would he have won sooner? Would it have changed the trajectory of his career?
Tough to say. But I think the fact that he stuck to his guns, chose roles that he felt passionate about, even if they weren't always the most obvious Oscar contenders, says a lot about his integrity as an artist.
Totally. And when he finally did win for The Revenant, it felt like a victory not just for him, but for everyone who had been rooting for him all those years.
Yeah, like a vindication almost.
And it's worth noting that he's won plenty of other awards throughout his career, too. BAFTAs, Golden Globes, SAG Awards. So even without the Oscar, he was already a highly respected and decorated actor.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But, his impact extends beyond just acting, right? You mentioned in your notes that you were interested in his production company, Appian Way Productions. What's the deal with that?
It's really interesting. He co-founded it back in 2004, and they've produced a wide range of films and documentaries, a lot of which align with his personal values and interests.
So, like, not just starring in movies, but actually shaping the stories that get told.
Exactly. They've done everything from documentaries on environmental issues like Cowspiracy and The Ivory Game to more mainstream films like The Ides of March and Shutter Island.
So, an eclectic mix, but there seems to be a common thread. They're all films that make you think, challenge the status quo, and maybe even make you a little uncomfortable at times.
Definitely. And it seems like he's using his platform to amplify voices that might not otherwise be heard, supporting filmmakers who are tackling important issues.
And speaking of using his platform, let's talk about his presence on social media, or rather, his lack of presence. You had a question about this in your notes.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? He's one of the most famous people on the planet, but he's barely on social media.
It's almost like he's going against the grain, intentionally staying out of that whole online frenzy.
It is. Most celebrities are constantly tweeting and posting, trying to stay relevant and keep their fans engaged. But he's not playing that game.
I mean, he has accounts, but he rarely posts. And when he does, it's almost always about environmental issues or promoting his foundation's work.
It's like he's drawing a line saying, this is what I care about, and this is how I'm going to use my platform.
It makes you wonder if he sees social media as a distraction, or maybe even as a threat to his privacy, which he clearly values a lot.
It's possible. Or maybe he just doesn't feel the need to engage in that way. He's already got a huge platform through his films and his activism, and he's using it very deliberately.
Yeah, it's refreshing in a way.
Yeah.
He's not chasing likes and followers. He's focused on making a real-world impact.
And that, I think, is a big part of what makes him so compelling. He's not just a celebrity, he's a force for change.
So we've talked about his upbringing, his acting career, his environmental activism, his private life, his Oscar journey, his production company, and even his social media strategy, or lack thereof. It feels like we're getting a pretty well-rounded picture of this guy.
We are, and it's a complex picture. He's not easy to define, which I think is part of his appeal.
Yeah, there are a lot of contradictions, which just makes it more interesting. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what do you think? Who is the man behind the icon?
It's tough to say definitively, but I think we can safely say he's someone who is deeply driven by his values, both in his personal and professional life.
He's not afraid to go against the grain, to challenge the status quo, and to use his platform to make a difference in the world.
He's a reminder that success doesn't have to look a certain way, and that you can use your influence for good without compromising your integrity.
And maybe, just maybe, a little bit of mystery adds to the allure.
Maybe a lot.
All right, folks, that's a wrap on our deep dive into the fascinating world of Leonardo DiCaprio. We hope you enjoyed exploring these different facets of his life with us. And who knows, maybe you'll be inspired to dive a little deeper yourself. Until next time. Looking back at all those articles, it's so clear that people are fascinated by DiCaprio, but not just because of his movies. It's like there's this deeper level of intrigue, this sense that he's more than just a Hollywood star.
Right. There's this curiosity about his commitment to things beyond the red carpet, especially his environmental activism. It seems like that really resonates with people.
And that's been a constant throughout his career, hasn't it? It's not just something he's jumped on recently.
No, absolutely. It goes way back. One of the articles even mentioned how his foundation has made a real impact, like protecting endangered species, supporting sustainable practices, actually making a difference on the ground.
Yeah, it talked about how they've helped create marine reserves, funded anti-poaching patrols, really getting involved in finding solutions.
That's what's so impressive. It's not just about donating money. He's actively engaged in the work, advocating for change, raising awareness on a global level.
Remember when he spoke at that UN climate summit?
Yeah.
I mean, that was a powerful speech.
Yeah, really impactful. He didn't hold back. He really laid out the urgency of the crisis and challenged world leaders to step up.
It's like he's using his fame to amplify the message, to give a voice to the environmental movement.
Exactly. And the documentaries he's produced, Before the Flood and Ice on Fire, they've reached millions of people.
And they're not just preaching to the choir either. They're designed to really open people's eyes to the reality of climate change and hopefully inspire them to get involved.
I think the way he combines the science with compelling storytelling is key. He's not just throwing facts and figures at people, he's making it personal, emotional, showing why this issue matters to all of us.
So we've covered a lot, right? Early life, his acting choices, environmental activism, that intensely private personal life, even the whole Oscar saga. It's like we've pieced together this multi-dimensional portrait of the guy.
It's been fascinating going beyond those headlines to really uncover the layers of who he is. He's a complex person, that's for sure.
Driven by his passions, his values, and this desire to make a positive impact on the world.
Absolutely. And he's doing it all on his own terms.
But still, there's that element of mystery, right?
Yeah. Even after all this, there's still so much we don't know. He's managed to maintain a sense of privacy that's almost unheard of for someone of his stature.
He's inviting us to engage with his work, his causes, but ultimately she keeps a part of himself hidden.
And maybe that's part of what makes him so intriguing. He's not trying to be everything to everyone. He's just being himself, letting his actions speak louder than any carefully crafted persona.
So to answer that initial question, who is the man behind the icon? It seems like, well, he's a man of contradictions. Intensely private, yet globally influential.
Exactly. Committed to artistic integrity, but also deeply passionate about using his platform for social good.
A Hollywood A-lister who shuns the spotlight, chooses substance over superficiality.
Leonardo DiCaprio is proof that you can be successful, you can be famous, and still stay true to yourself. And maybe, just maybe, you can use that success to make the world a better place.
It's a powerful message. I think that's something we can all take away from this. Well, folks, that wraps up our deep dive into the world of Leonardo DiCaprio. It's been a pleasure exploring these fascinating articles with you. We hope you learned something new, maybe even discovered a different side to this enigmatic figure. Until next time, keep diving deep.